always gives me pressure to be in such a forum because you are likely to listen to real things rather than, and you know where the pain points are. And I do believe that for me that is very, very important because those are the issues that we deal with. Every day you wake up, every day you sleep, you're still thinking about those three things and how to improve on them. So I'm sure the issues that we are going to debate on today, including some old friends here who are known for the discussions, is those things that actually affect us, but those things that we also have knowledge about, and those things that actually we have an idea what should be done. And that is perhaps the message. So I'm so happy to be here, and the Diamond Trust board members are also here, led by the chairman. Thank you very much for inviting me. And the Diamond Trust Bank Managing Director, it's an old bank and also old friends. Madam Nasim, we have been together for some years. And all distinguished guests who have been invited here, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. One of the things that struck me is the title. And it says that it is this is DTB Economic and Sustainability Forum. And I was telling myself, do I need to read my speech? Because I've been talking about this for a couple of years now. Let me give you a flavor of it. In 2021, when we were all desperate and looking very gloomy about the economic recovery, somebody asked me, a very big organization globally asked me, what would it take Africa to recover from these negative shocks? And some of them they are global, but they are persistent. And when you have persistent shocks, especially surprise shocks, negative surprise shocks that are persistent, they create some permanent effect. In economics, we usually say, oh, they create a structural effect. It means you have to require massive reforms to reverse them. A good example is if you look at the drought that has ravaged us, our estimation was that it has reversed all the government's effort for the last 20 years in terms of reducing poverty, fighting inequality, and even created a new dimension of civil conflict because of fighting for natural resources, water. If you go into any of the shocks, the COVID-19, then you find everything is ravaging. So somebody asked me, what will it take for an economic recovery? And I thought about 4 areas, and I'm sure most of the panelists I saw here will come and realize that the reality is just that. And I started by saying, first, we have to go back and look at our human capital development and what we really need to do. And the most important thing was to focus on education, focus on health that was tested to the limit by COVID-19, and especially not just health facilities, but also health infrastructure. But we also needed to look at the labor markets themselves, and we wanted to look at nutrition. I said human capital development because I do know that that is where our institutions have failed. That is where generating enough jobs is hitting on us. But the most important thing is that you find, even, is it last week? Last week we had a human capital summit sponsored by the world in Tanzania, and we had all heads of state, and all the same thing was coming together. So I thought human capital was very, very critical. The second factor I talked about was actually markets. We have to develop the markets. We have to nudge the markets to the optimal path. We have to protect those markets, because if you don't protect them, you know what happens. And it is any market. You know, this morning when I met Nasim, the first thing was to tell me about what is happening to the financial market. Okay? So in a sense, if you don't protect the markets, then it means something will go wrong, because it is in the marketplace that economic rent is shared and distributed. It is in the market where the investors can appropriate returns for their own investments, because if you cannot appropriate returns for your own investment because somehow the terms of trade have changed in the marketplace, then the markets will collapse. And finally, you need to regulate the markets. But if you start by regulating the markets, then you fail. That's why I say develop, nudge the market to the optimal path, protect the market, but regulate the markets. It's going to be vibrant. And I talked about that, and I said, I'm not talking about in the market, but of course, because of my friend Rainas, when I talk about market, everybody will say, oh, he's thinking about the financial market. No, I'm talking about the totality of markets. Why you have seen fights, for example, in coffee sector, in sugar sector, is because we failed to regulate and protect the market. And once the market collapses, it collapses with all the... So when we are talking about economic forum and sustainability, you know exactly where I'm going. That's the second bucket. But before I leave that, you can imagine when you watch the market, and it is telling you about this is what is really happening in the market. It ignites when you see the market is working downstream, that is, just to make an assumption, wherever it is downstream, whether it is small-scale producers watching the aggregator at the marketplace and selling, it will increase production and productivity. Upstream, those market participants will be looking at incomes. That's what keeps market going. That was the second bucket. The third bucket was domestic resource mobilization. Yeah. You know, I give examples. Right now, everything that you say is taxes. But we have failed to understand what taxes are used for. My brother, former senator here, will tell you more about that, because when I talk about it, you believe that I'm begging you to go and impose taxes. No, I'm not imposing taxes. What we're really saying is that we have failed in terms of our social contract. That is why most people complain about taxation, is because they are not looking at the side of the social contract. But what I wanted to say in domestic resource mobilization, and that was the whole of Africa, is that we have to come up with instruments that allow us to optimize the tax instruments that we have, and we have to go into analytical work to show that the tax instruments are also going to be an incentive. But more importantly, we have to finance development, because if you don't finance development, then the whole issue of sustainability does not work. You know, so some years ago, we used to debate, by the way, do you know that the government is the major employer, the major investor, the major consumer, isn't it? So if it doesn't raise taxes, then it cannot function that. But more importantly, resource mobilization is not just taxes, it's also other avenues of domestic resource mobilization. There are so many works that have been that are in the pipeline. I personally have done a lot of work in this area. I can talk about it until cows come home, because I do believe there are incentives to finance development. And then the fourth area was digital evolution, and what we are dabbling as the fourth industrial revolution. Most of the academics have seen my works in this area. And that's why Raina has talked about M-Pesa. What was M-Pesa? It was a retail electronic payments platform that allowed us to actually allow retail payments across markets, even in informal markets. And when you come up with an innovation like that navigates across all segments of the market, it is very, very important, because it is the one that leads to the revolution that we want. That is why it was held across Kenya by everyone, and that is why we can use it for so many issues. In fact, one of the papers that I wrote recently was that once you have a payment system that is working, it is going to be a game changer. And that is why when I talk about the Industrial Revolution, it means that it can coordinate all the other three issues that I've raised, from human capital development, down to markets, down to domestic resource mobilization. It can be coordinated by the fourth industrial revolution, that is the digital space. And that's why the government is actually using or moving to the space of saying we have to digitize all the services. Once everything is working, whether it is payments, whether it's production, everything will work very well. And that's why I was telling myself, when I saw the Sustainability Forum, I would have avoided my speech and just talk about that, because I can talk that until cows come home. But because there will be a panel, when you see, by the way, if you're a game theorist, you already know. For me, when I came in and I saw the settings, so I knew there will be a question and answer somewhere. But the beauty about it is that, let me talk about that. I was just drawing that for the people who are going to be there. But let me say that you have to have a speech that outlines some of those issues. Even though I have talked about them, they will show up. But I'm delighted to join the Diamond Trust DTB community this morning. When you're doing your quarterly engagement, and even the participants that are here from the private sector, and from us, from the government, and even from the media, to talk about the theme of Kenya economic outlook, prospects, opportunities, and challenges for business, but more importantly, a broader theme of economic and sustainability forum. I believe this is an important area, and obviously, talking about it, we can come to the reality of what we are facing. But more importantly, we have different experiences, and we can summarize those different experiences and ask ourselves, where are the answers? I do believe that the financial sector plays an important role in the country's economic development. But more importantly, once it's better developed, the financial system, because of its depth, can actually ignite economic vibrancy. And that economic vibrancy is very, very important for us, because it will pull the economy, the rest of the economy with it. And we do know that our financial sector is relatively strong. It is competitive. It is vibrant. But we can do more and we can do better. It is expected to play a critical role in promoting vibrant economic activity by or using the instruments to actually finance development or even finance investments. Indeed, the development of strong and well-functioning financial sector has never been more important than today, especially when we relate with the issues of negative shocks. We relate with issues of what we need to do to overcome structural rigidities, and where we require quantum of investments to try and tilt the balance of economic sustainability and economic vibrancy. We do know that we have come through various challenges at the economic level. Those challenges has been occasioned by shocks that are beyond, or negative shocks that are beyond our control. But we do know that they have one major characteristic. As I mentioned earlier, they are persistent, and so they create a permanent effect. They are from the supply side, and so it means that we rarely have tools on the supply side. But the most important thing is that economies in Africa are going to reverse, and Kenyan economy is going to reverse just because we know exactly what we really need to do. And so that's why we're looking at various instruments, various solutions that can help us move and march on. And one of the sectors that we really rely on is the financial market. And of course, the financial markets also suffers from its own problems. And most of the time, I always complain about the lack of structured finance. And you have seen the debate about the changing in the multilateral financial system. And that debate has its own place just because of the way things are coming out, and especially during those persistent shocks, we didn't see the multilateral institutions providing the solutions with the speed and flexibility that would have been anticipated. And let me come back home. The economy faces when this new administration came to office, we realized that the economy was facing two extremes, or there are constraints in the extremes. One of them is resources, that is financing constraint, and on the other extreme was limited headroom for debt, because we were choked with inherited debt that must be paid. And obviously, we have seen a field day with rating agencies. You know, these days, this morning I told someone that, you know, some of the things that we look at, they are actually not science, they are just art, isn't it? What I mean by art is totally different. Science, there is precise prescription of what you do at step 1, step 2. But in art, it's something totally different. You can innovatively think about some solution. It all depends on who shouts loudly and sells the product. But the most important thing is to understand that it is a place where we can look for our own solutions. It's not a place where we want to read the solutions that are required, like a menu, and believe that they can work. But the banking industry, the banking system, will continue to play a critical role in the implementation and the realization of the current administration's bottom-up economic transformation agenda. And these two terms, the bottom-up, is quite critical, because the bottom-up is reflecting a large proportion of Kenyans who have been left behind and have sunk into abject poverty. And economic transformation is very important, because we need to create a momentum for economic vibrancy and sustainability. And that is where we will need even to target job creation for the youth. So it means that capital accumulation is going to be very, very important, because it must reach some thresholds that can ignite economic transformation. Why I started talking about human capital development is because we have seen and learned from, for example, the Asian tigers, the level of capital accumulation has to surpass some thresholds to allow a dynamic economic transformation. And we can only do that by building that part of our system, that is the capital accumulation. In the past, we have tried to ignite or to close the gap of capital accumulation using debt. But I've led some works by structuralists that says that, debt, governance issues come in, so it doesn't give us the boost that we wanted for capital accumulation. But that is the political economy I don't know about, but I have some friends who know a little bit about that. So ladies and gentlemen, the government will continue to move investments to high productive activities, and even sectors that can be prioritized or have been earmarked so that they can provide us with the largest impact, including multiplier effect, such as agriculture, affordable housing as the way it has been laid out. In fact, universal health care is also going to be critical, the medium and small enterprises, and the digital superhighway, which these 5 sectors can ignite the largest impact in the economy. They can create a large multiplier effect that is going to be sustainable and creates its own momentum, endogenous momentum, and that for us is going to be very important. That's why I would like to urge all of us here to heed the call to partner in some of these activities. Depending on where you come from, you can actually find a dimension to partner and even to participate in these activities in those sectors in order to realize better and sustainable livelihoods for the Kenyan citizens and create wealth, because that is what is going to help us. Once we create wealth, then we will create an endogenous momentum for the future, and we know how it propels itself. As you are aware, under the BETA, that is Bottom-Up Economic Transformation Agenda, we see MSMEs playing a central role in supporting sustainable growth. We have seen specific medium and small enterprises which are seeking to address easy access, for example, to long-term funding through banking system, and even in the capital markets. They even have been wishing to be listed. That's why when I talked about markets, I talked in a deep way, in a general way, but you can see that for over 10 years, I was looking at over 10 years, how many companies have we listed? What is the problem? There must be candidates waiting. Why are we not listing them? So many of these things. Is it size that matters? Size does not matter. I think everybody, some of us who are sitting in this hall, can make their own assessment whether you want to buy shares of a particular company. It's not the size that is going to drive you, it's the prospects. But somehow, somewhere, somebody has gone to sleep. And that is why we need to ignite all these dimensions to try and push them to the rest. When I talk about regulators and what needs to be done, I go broadly, but I know what exactly we are saying. And such issues like listing, giving a pathways to vibrancy, giving a pathways to development is very, very important for enterprises so that they can look at diverse ways of financing their activities. We don't want them to be choked by debt. And we don't want them to be unable to create wealth and jobs that we really want. We want to make sure that they are transformative. Medium and small enterprises are transformative. And that is how they are going to accelerate economic recovery and growth. And that is how we want to describe them as agents of growth, but not just describe them. We have to go down and say, how do we help them in all the sectors they are found in? So that's why when I went back, I talked to myself, and I always focus on markets. If the market development is curtailed, if nudging the market towards the optimal path, or if you don't protect the markets, then somewhere we will fail. So let's watch that space. Further, there is need to support sustainable development through use of climate finance instruments like the green bonds and other green fiscal incentives. The chairman, Linus, talked about even renewable energy. Close to 94% of our energy is renewable. Even in our small homes, we have Kenya Power, we still have solar, isn't it? But somehow Kenya Power has never seen that you can integrate both. Actually, everybody can raise their hand if I ask you, how much capacity have you installed in your solar? Just to heat water, isn't it? Others for security rights, isn't it? But it's excessive because you don't need security rights until the night. The hot water that was heated, maybe using 1 hour of solar, you'll need it in the evening when you come home, isn't it? But during the day, the Kenya Power can take credits, isn't it? Can fix you to the grid. We have failed to integrate ourselves, Linus, you know. Even us, smallholder farmers, like Linus can tell you, we have even biogas, and we have connected even biogas to kitchens for our workers, isn't it? We have been there. But we need a mechanism to institutionalize all this. Kenya Power sees me as a competitor, isn't it? Anyway, something that we can talk about. We need to see these aspects and see how we can contain them. They are there with that. They are just low-hanging fruits. In fact, some of them are not low-hanging fruits. They're actually fruits on the ground. You can pick them up. So it's something that we want to see. But that I was introducing this dimension because of what Rainer said. But more importantly, I wanted actually to show that how we can move towards inclusive green finance. But more importantly, Kenya and the African Union are hosting the African Union Commission are hosting the Climate Summit in 4th to 6th September, 2023. And this is going to be an eye-opener for these issues. And even more importantly, The government is keen to streamline the trading of commodities in the country, and especially using so many of those green bonds, and they're going to be tradable in the market. And that is the only way we can create an avenue of climate finance that is going to help us in terms of all other avenues of financing development. But more importantly, we would like to turn our renewable energy into aspect of what we can actually provide and use, which is going to be sustainable. The whole issue and concept of sustainability becomes very, very important for us, and that is only how we can actually create incomes or even wealth using the natural resources that we can use, that we can apply, and we do know that they are sustainable. But coming back to the banking sector, a well-functioning banking sector will require some enabling policy and regulatory framework, as well as synchronization of robust regulatory framework. But more importantly, we need institutional capacity to understand where are we going to and where are we coming from. How can we create innovative environment for that sector? And the government will continue to play a very facilitative role in ensuring that policy and regulatory framework responds to market needs to ensure the Kenyan banking industry is aligned and supported by government's agenda, and also the collaboration between the industry stakeholders and the government. I'm sure because we have a lineup of plenary here that is going to take place, these are the issues that we would like to correct and go back to the office. We can always have a relationship in terms of trying to understand how the market is doing. We can try to understand the pain points in terms of the industry. I was there for 8 years. Of course, 8 years is a long time. And I can tell you, Nasim can tell you that we worked very closely together, not only with the DTB, but all the banks. Because the most important thing is the regulator must understand how the market is working. Regulation is not waving an axe. If you want to understand the market, you have to be closer to the market. If you are going to ignite development, you have to understand the market. That is why when I came with the 4 principles, the last one is to regulate the market. But what are you doing? You are just reminding the market that there are rules of the game, isn't it? But if you have done the rest, things will work very well. So, but what do we require? We require strong institutions, and the strong institutions of the regulator is very, very critical. The strong institutions are able to understand the market dynamics. They are able to nudge the market in terms of the optimal path. They are able to develop solutions that are consistent with the market behavior. But more importantly, they can advise the market. You can only advise the market if you understand the market. But before that, you just regulate the market by reminding them that there are rules of the game, first. And second, you remind the market that there is the cardinal rule of trying to make sure that you define the legal framework, but also you define the incentive mechanism. And as I always said during those years, the rules of the game, once they are observed, and appropriate incentives are also defined, a combination of those two will create a very prudent behavior in the marketplace. And that's how markets function. Everywhere I turned, when you go to Tanzania, when you go to Uganda, and you are in Kenya, you have a very strong SME department. We are saying you have a technology of managing SMEs. You have the knowledge base, and we can use that knowledge base to cover the rest of the economy. We want to use that knowledge base to understand the dynamics of the SMEs and MSME sector, because unless we understand their dynamics, we cannot help them. If you don't understand the dynamics, you cannot also propose propose policies to support them. So we should work jointly, because you know exactly what happens in that sector. So I know that that's been very critical. And for us, the MSME sector is very, very critical for the economic agenda that we have, as bottom-up economic transformation agenda has portrayed. So allow me to take this opportunity to commend DTB for setting up this forum, which is a unique opportunity to recognize the constraints we face, and we seek solutions to these constraints, and also map out long-run strategy. Sustainability is about long-run strategy. And we also want to make sure that we align to better. Let me say one more word about better, because as a government official and somebody who has maybe researched in this area, it's an agenda, not a theory. Some of you know that I'm on record when we talked about export-led growth. We talked about import substitution in the 60s. Nobody came back to say why we failed. We are not adopting a model, we are adopting an agenda. So that agenda, you can pack it with the solutions, the knowledge base, and instruments that can make it work. But export-led growth required some preconditions. Import substitution, of course, you remember the main criticism was that we were emphasizing capital-intensive manufacturing in a capital-scarce economy. Export-led growth, I can tell you that the East Asian tigers had spent 50 years of building their own capacity and capital accumulation before they ignited the export-led growth. When we are killing our sectors, especially critical sectors that we know smallholder farmers are working on, and the principle of aggregation, which has worked so well. By the way, I was reminding some people, you'll know those liners. For example, I met Sir Nicholas Tan. He was one time the chief economist of the World Bank before he went to the Treasury. That his PhD was on smallholder farming in the tea sector. So I was telling him, you should come and find out that people haven't moved from where you left them in the 60s. They have managed to get some income, but they are still facing the same institutional constraints that we're facing. Why I say that is because we should not see our coffee sector collapse, our sugar sector collapse. We have tried to revive the cotton industry, we haven't managed. Pyrethrum is struggling. All these are they're not low-hanging fruits, by the way. They are fruits on the ground, isn't it? So when we talk about that, that's why I'm saying this is an agenda. It's for all of us to take up responsibility and fix the problem. Some of them they are not institutional problems because they are not structural. Some of them are political economy problems of economic rent sharing, and we can solve that by creating better mechanisms of doing that. That's why I'm saying better is an agenda, and everybody can have capability of fixing the problem. We then agree on hard rules to follow. So I look forward to your continued support and partnership as we seek to steer the economy forward and improve the livelihoods of Kenyans. That is why I didn't want to say that I was coming with prescription. I was coming with an idea that it's an agenda you and I can debate and decide, let's go and do it. Let me take this opportunity to wish you a fruitful deliberations. I'll try to stay on until I listen to the discussions and be part of it. But I've tried to talk about the real issues myself because I see the real issues. I interact with people. But it's good to make those comments and then allows us to think about them. They allows us to think about solutions. And we do know that we can get formidable solutions that can be used. And I do believe that the recommendations you make in this forum and some of the suggestions that are made in this forum, we can take home and try to make them work. And that is where sustainability will come from. And I do believe that this is going to work today, and we are going to create better days for ourselves in future.